Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Please join us today for Srimadbhagavatam study. And let's get started with Jaya Radha Madhav prayers. Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Jiva Dhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Jiva Dhari. Yashodanandana Vrindaranjana. Yashodanandana Vrindaranjana. Krishna. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Happy Ekadashi. Today we'll cover Ekadashi Special. Lord Krishna is the center of everything. Please join us in the Mangalacharan prayers. Let's sing it together. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirye Shrutam Swakatha Krishna Punya Shamana Kirtanaha Hridayantasto Bhadrani Vidunoti Suhasatam Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavti Naishchiki. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. So today we'll be studying Srimadbhagavatam, 10th Canto, chapter 84, the sages' teachings at Kurukṣetra. So today is Ekadashi. Happy Ekadashi to all. Today is Shayan Ekadashi, also known as Deva Shayan Ekadashi and Padma Ekadashi. So various names, but a very auspicious day, and the message is, of course, even more auspicious, that Lord Krishna is in the center of everything. Hare Krishna. Please join us for the recitation of the verse in Srimadbhagavatam, 10th Canto, chapter 84, the sages' teachings at Kurukṣetra. Shri Shuka Uvacha Shrutva Pratha Subala Putreyata Yagya Seni
Shrutva Pritha Subala Putratha Yagyaseni
Madhavyata Shitipa Patanyauta Swagopyaha
Madhavyatshiti Patanyauta Swagopya
Shane Akhilatmani Hara Pranayanubandham
Krishnet Kilatmani Haro Pranayanubandham
Sarva Visisbhyo Alam Ashru Kala Kulakshayaha
Sarva Vishishmyo Ralamma Shu Kala Kulakshya.
Please.
Shri Shukavacha
Shri Shuka Uvacha
Shrutva Pritha Subal Putryat Yagyaseni
Shrutva Pritha Subala Putriyata Yagyaseni
Madhavyatashiti Patnyauta Swagopya
Madhavyata Shatipa Patanya Utaswagopyaha
Krishne Kilatmani Haro Pranananubandham
Krishne Akilatmani Haro Pranayanubandham
Sarva Vishishmyo Ralamma Shru Kala Kulaksha
Sarva Visismyur Alam Ashru Kala Kulakshayaha Shri Shuka Uvacha
Shri Shukavacha
Shri Shukdev Goswami said,
Shri Shukdev Goswami said
Shrutva,
Shrutva
hearing, Pratha,
Pratha
Kunti,
Kunti
Subala Putri,
Subalputri
Gandhari,
Gandhari
the daughter of King Subala,
the daughter of King Subala
Atha, and Yagyaseni,
Yagyaseni
Draupadi,
Draupadi
Madhavi,
Madhavi
Subhadra,
Subhadra
Atha,
Atha
and Shitipa
Shitipa
of the kings. Patniyaha,
Patniya
the wives.
the wives
Uta,
Uta
also. Swa, Lord Krishna's own.
Lord Krishna's own
Gopyaha,
Gopya
Gopis.
Gopis
Krishna,
Krishna
to Krishna.
to Krishna
Akhila,
Khila
of all.
of all
Atmani, the soul,
the soul,
Haro,
Haro,
the Supreme Lord Hari,
the Supreme Lord Hari,
Pranaya,
Praniya,
loving,
loving,
Anubandham,
Anubandham,
attachment,
attachment,
Sarvaha,
Sarva,
all of them,
all of them,
Visismyu,
Sismya,
became amazed,
became amazed,
Alam,
Alam,
greatly,
greatly,
Ashru Kala,
Shukala,
with tears,
with tears,
Akula,
Akula,
filling,
filling,
Akshayaha,
Akshaya,
whose eyes.
whose eyes.
Translation by the disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Shrudev Goswami said, Pratha, Gandhari, Draupadi, Subhadra, the wives of other kings, and the Lord's cowherd girlfriends were all amazed to hear the Queen's deep love for Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and soul of all beings, and their eyes filled with tears. Purport. Draupadi is the chief hearer in this assembly of exalted women, since, as explained by Srila Sridhar Swami, she had asked the question that Lord Krishna's queens answered by relating their respective stories. Since Gandhari and the other ladies named here were not even mentioned in the previous chapter as having been present, Acharya Sridhar concludes that they must have heard the queen's narrations only second-hand. Indeed, Draupadi would never have spoken so freely in the presence of Pratha and Gandhari, her elders, or before the gopis, whose attitude towards the queens of Dwarka was not particularly sympathetic. Even though the gopis joined in shedding tears, it was more because of their being reminded of Shri Krishna's pastimes than because of any loving affinity between them and the queens. We should remember, of course, that there is always perfect harmony on the spiritual platform. Apparent conflict between pure devotees is nothing like mundane envy or strife. The jealousy of the gopis was more show than substance, being exhibited by them as an ecstatic symptom of their overflowing love for Krishna. Srila Sridhar Swamipad further analyzes the phrase Swagopyaha as implying that these gopis were the queens Swaswarupa, the original prototypes of whom the queens were specific expansions. Hare Krishna. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashat Deshatarine Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripa tadaham vande Shri Gurum dinataranam. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So today is Shayan Ekadashi, and it's a very auspicious day, and it's also the beginning of the Chaturmasya. So let's quickly cover, because there is a blessing. Whoever hears and narrates this pastime of Shayan Ekadashi, so the hearer are completely freed of all their sinful reactions. So it's a great blessing, right? We all want to get to that, zero margin so that we can go above, right? To remove all the reactions of our sinful actions that we may have performed knowingly or unknowingly. So the actions we can perform can be in three ways: mind, body, and words. So if we have by mistake offended anyone, of course there is some concession in this Kali age, in this age of quarrel and hypocrisy. Yet at the same time we want to be safe and we want to be secured with our positions, with our spiritual life, in our devotional service. And it's always good to hear about Krishna, because hearing about Krishna is all purifying. Sankirtan Yajna, right? That's the Yajna for this age. And that is also being, explained here in this particular chapter, as Srila Prabhupada in his purpose in Krishna book also elaborates that the age of Kali, this age, sacrifice for this age is Sankirtan Yajna, congregational chanting of the holy name. So here, Yudhishthira Maharaj asks Lord Keshava, Lord Krishna, that please describe to me about this Ekadashi that occurs during this month of June, July, during the light fortnight, Shukla Paksh. Shukla Paksh is waxing moon. Now waxing is like when the moon size is increasing, that's Shukla Paksh. Krishna Paksh is when the size of the moon is decreasing. So after Krishna Paksh comes Amavasya, also known as new moon day. And after Shukla Paksh, as the size of the moon is increasing, so it's the uncovered part because of the sun rays, that's decreasing. And so it comes later after Shukla Paksh comes full moon, which is Purnima. So he's anxious to hear, and Lord Krishna, he's narrating him the glories of Shayan Ekadashi, also known as Padma Ekadashi, in the month of Ashad. And Lord Krishna says that I will narrate to you an incident of where this same question was raised by Devashi Narad to Lord Brahma. So Devashi Narad asked Lord Brahma, "Oh my dear father, what is this Ekadashi that occurs during the month of Ashad, June, July, during the waxing moon time? And please narrate its glories to me." So Lord Brahma, being very pleased by this question, because it is for the benefit of all humanity. So we always want to relish the message that spread the message of love, message of happiness, message of glories of Lord Shri Krishna, of God, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here, Lord Brahma is narrating this story of Ekadashi to Narad Muni. He says that once there lived a king, a Suryavamshi, one who was born in the Sun dynasty. His name was King Mandhata. Now there is an interesting aspect with King Mandhata, that he was born of a father, but there was no mother, because his father from the right side of his body gave birth. And we have covered that multiple times in our previous chapters, but it's very interesting that we know from Srimadbhagavatam that there are two personalities. Actually, there are four personalities who are born of just father, no mother. Agastya Muni, Vashishta Muni, Lord Brahma, and King Mandhata. So that's a homework you may want to take on. So how that happened. And of course, it was in Canto 9. I'll give you the hint also where you can find about King Mandhata's birth. So King Mandhata, he was a very righteous king. He was carrying out his, administration as per Vedic injunctions. And he regarded the Brahmanas very highly, and he was using, they were his advisors, and he was, using all his capabilities, all his engagement, all his time in making sure that everything is running very nicely. And he was the ruler of the earth, the whole planet. So it just so happened that during his reign, at that time when he was the king, emperor of the world, and Shukdev Goswami is narrating, means again in Srimadbhagavatam when this was narrated, of course, Parikshit Maharaj wants to know about the emperors of the world, right? And King Mandhata was one of them. So King Mandhata, when he was ruling, at that time, he was ruling it so nicely that there was no famine, no sickness. Everyone was very wealthy, not just, doing well, but also everyone was very wealthy. Everyone was advancing very well in their spiritual progress, and everyone was collaborating with each other. And this is Krita Yuga, right? Satyug. During that time, he was ruling. However, it just so happened that there was a famine, just like we have current pandemic due to coronavirus. So there was no rain at that time for 3 years. And so one day, his citizens from his kingdom, they came pleading to him that, "Oh dear king, please find a solution. Why is this famine there? Why is there no rain? And what is the cause?" And King Mandhata, he responds to them, that after having consulted with all his advisors, the brahmanas and the sages, he could not find any sin in his past life or in his present life, even done, performed unknowingly. And he is unable to find a solution. However, he would go back and try to find a solution, because that's a responsibility of the ruler. An administrator should try to find a simple solution so that the citizens can stay happy. And they are responsible to make sure that the citizens are not disturbed. Unlike the current situation where news media ignores everything and spreads, the message of hatredness, the conflicts and all those things. Rather, the message everyone should be spreading is message of love, message of cooperation, message of collaborating with each other for, mutual benefit, by engaging in spiritual studies, by knowing about Krishna, by chanting the holy name, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So here, King Mandhata, he, consoles his citizens, so they return. While everyone in his kingdom, the whole planet Earth is suffering because there is famine, there is no rain. So King Mandhata, he takes on himself, and he starts to, with his close associates and, some soldiers, he is going from forest to forest, trying to meet different sages to find solution. And none of them are able to provide solution. And finally, he able to, see an ashram which was glowing, with effulgence. So he goes there. Who does he see? So Lord Keshav is narrating this to Yudhishthira Maharaj, that he saw, Lord Brahma is narrating, and that Lord Brahma is saying that my son Angira Rishi. He reaches there. So when he goes and he sees Angira Rishi, sage Angira, he immediately gets off his horse and he pays obeisances to the sage. And, asks for benediction. So at that time, sage, he's very happy to see the king. He's the emperor of the world. And sage was glowing like second Brahma. So that has been described. So effulgence was coming out of his body. That's why his ashram was glowing. Just like Lord Krishna, the effulgence comes out of his body, and this is Brahman. So here the sage asks about the 7 limbs of the king. And the king discusses and tells about his 7 limbs. He himself, his ministers, his treasury, the brahmanas, the needs of his populace, and so forth. And then the sage asks, what is the reason? Why are you taking such a, hard journey, going around? What are you looking for? So the king reveals his mind. He says that there's been a famine and I am not able to come to the solution. So at that time, Angira Rishi, he says that actually, after meditating, he says, I know the reason why this is happening. That there is an untrained person, a Shudra, who's not trained in performing austerities, meditation. Kritetad dhyate Vishnu. So in Krita Yuga, by meditating on Lord Vishnu, one can attain for perfection. However, this Shudra is not qualified, he is not trained, so he's trying to perform this meditation, and that is causing all these disturbances. And so he should be punished. And what's the punishment? That he should be killed for having performed this. King Mandhata says, but he has not performed any, offenses to anyone. He is not performed, from that perspective. So how can he be, given such a severe punishment that he be killed? So Angira Rishi meditates on it and then responds back that in that case, if you don't want to, punish him, then there is a solution. And what is the solution? That in the month of Ashad, June, July, in the light fortnight, Shukla Paksh, when the waxing moon is there is an Ekadashi that comes, also known as Shayan Ekadashi, Padma Ekadashi. On that day, you should, observe Ekadashi. And by the mercy of Ekadashi Devi, if you perform the Ekadashi very well, meditating on Lord Rishikesh, Upavas, right? We also call it, fasting as Upavas. Upa means under who, Vas is near. So having a close, in shelter of Lord Krishna, that's what Upavas is. We want to stay close to Lord Krishna. So have this fasting, observe this fasting on the Ekadashi, and that will remedy. And so king, he is very happy, he pays obeisances, and seeks for the blessings, and then afterwards he comes back to his kingdom. And as the Ekadashi comes near, he calls all his citizens, not just Brahmanas. He calls all four Varnas, all of his citizens, Brahmanas, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudras, everyone. And he informs them of the message that the sage gave. And he instructs them. So as an emperor, he's an administrator, so he can administer, he can give them instruction. So he gives them the instruction that everyone should observe Ekadashi. Why? Because it is for our own benefit. And what's the benefit? That this famine will go away. So all the citizens, including the king, they all observe Ekadashi. And by observing the Ekadashi, the rain comes next day. And so famine goes away and everyone is again prosperous. So we are constantly being tormented in this material world, and currently COVID-19 pandemic is going on. So my request to everyone is, please refrain from eating grain on this day. Some people observe, some devotees observe complete Ekadashi, but if you can't do complete Ekadashi, some people also do water-based Ekadashi, only have water. Some people only do phal-based, falahar-based Ekadashi. And then some people, they do non-grain-based Ekadashi. So as much as your body allows, you should try to perform Ekadashi. And why do people not eat grain? That's also a very important aspect. On this day, it just so happened that when Lord Krishna, he was visiting, so he was at Samyamani, capital of Yamraj. He was hearing this, from different hells, 8.4 million hells. So not just 8.4 million types of species, there are 8.4 million types of hells also. He was seeing this, the living entities being punished, and they were crying out because of all the pain and suffering they were experiencing. So at that time, Lord became compassionate. So he, and of course, Mother Radharani is even more compassionate. So by the mercy of Radharani, it was decided that, okay, if you refrain from, that, if you meditate on the Lordship, you could go back home, back to Godhead. And by performing Ekadashi, observing Ekadashi, you can get purified. So at that time, Papa Purush, right, the sin personified, came to Lord Krishna and he says, how could it be? Means then what will I do? All these sinful reactions will be counteracted by Ekadashi. If one is just, meditating on you and, engaging you, keeping you in the center. So at that time, the benediction was given because Papurush did not have any place in the universe on that day. So Lord allowed him to stay in the grain. So grains is where the sin resides on this day. So when you eat grain, you are unknowingly taking on those sins. And the sinful reactions is what you have to suffer. So that's why there is this injunction that we should refrain from eating grain on this day. And of course, that doesn't mean you start eating abominable things. You should be, the four regulatory principles still hold. The chanting of the holy name still hold. On this day, devotees chant minimum of 25 rounds. If you can, chant more rounds and engage the whole day in glorifying Lordship and in Sankirtan Yajna. So that is the best Yajna for this age. So whoever hears this narration that when Mandhata, he followed Angira Rishi's instruction and the famine went away, and observes it as well. So again, is devoid of all their sinful reactions. So very great, it's an amazing blessing. And especially at current times, we should observe this Ekadashi because we are being tormented by this pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. And we are all praying for, fast recovery of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj, as well as our very dear friend, His Grace Akshobhya Prabhu, and many other devotees. Two of the doctors we talked about, their parents were also identified with COVID-19. The results came out positive. So let's pray for all of them, as well as all living entities who are currently suffering because of this pandemic outbreak. Hare Krishna. So let's get started with the chapter. The sages' teachings at Kurukṣetra. So I will quickly cover the gist to this particular point, and of course, so that we can create, maintain the context. So during the solar eclipse, which was predicted early on by the astrologers, the Brahmins in Dwarka, they identified that there's going to be this complete solar eclipse, which actually generally occurred during the last day of, at the end of the day of Lord Brahma, at the end of Kalpa. So this is occurring. So taking this as an opportunity to perform charitable acts, the Yadavas, the Yadu dynasty, the inhabitants of Dwarka, they all went. So not all of them, as again prominent ones. Lord Krishna Balaram went with King Ugrasen, with their parents, Vasudeva and Devaki, and their sons, Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Samba and others. Gada was also there. And some generals like Kritvarma, Aniruddha, they stayed back in Dwarka to provide protection to the city. And as they went, first of all, when they went to Kurukṣetra at this auspicious time after taking bath, and they gave charity to the Brahmanas. Then other friends arrived, right? So Kurus arrived. Lord Bhishma Pitama came, King Dhritarashtra came with his sons, headed by Duryodhana. His wife Gandhari came. Queen Kunti with Yudhishthira Maharaj and the Pandavas, she came. And all these personalities, Viduji came, and all these personalities, they met with the Yadus. So Kurukṣetra, it's a region under the reign of Kurus. Yadavas, the inhabitants of Dwarka, the Yadus, they came to Kuru's region, and that's where they're there. So Kurus also came, and they had a very nice, greeting with each other. Vasudeva, Kunti, they were, brother and sisters. They were, asking welfare of each other, and also feeling sorry that, Vasudeva was feeling sorry that he could not address and take care of his sister when she was undergoing so much distress. That Lakh, burning of the Lakh palace incident had already happened, the wandering of Pandavas had already happened, the marriage with Draupadi and all that. They're constantly being tormented because of Duryodhana's scheming to kill them constantly, and having a full support from his father, Dhritarashtra, who was the blind king at that time. So after they met very nicely, came the inhabitants of Vrindavan. So they took this opportunity because Nand Maharaj came to know that Krishna Balaram, they are going to Kurukṣetra to perform charity. So in charity, you have to give cows, you have to give milk, abundance of milk is required, abundance of yogurt is required, abundance of, butter is required to perform sacrifices and so forth. And grains, of course. So he had, with the cowherd men and women and the young cowherd boys and gopis, they all went to Kurukṣetra because they are all eager to see who? Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when they went over there, they saw them, and Vasudeva came running to Nand Maharaj, and he embraced Nand Maharaj, and both, having seen each other after such a long time, they were shedding tears and embracing each other lovingly. They're half brother, half cousins. They have the same father, King Sursen was their father, and from his Kshatriya wife, he had Vasudeva, Pritha and many others, Shutasdeva and many other daughters, while from his Vaishya wife, so from a mercantile family, he had a wife, and from her he had Nand Maharaj as his son. So they are half brother, half cousins, and very dear friends of each other. And then they were, discussing, asking for welfare of each other, and so forth. And all the gopis also came. And then when they saw Lord Krishna, their eyes sometimes would blink because they would want to just absorb in seeing him. And, from their eyes, they would have him enter in their heart and embrace him. And Lord Krishna reciprocated. So again, sweet loving exchanges. And he's in the center. So everyone who's meeting in this place, Kurukṣetra, during this full solar eclipse, is talking about Lord Krishna. And it is said that That is the mood. When there is, eclipse occurring at that time, chanting of the holy name is paramount. Everyone should be engaged in devotional service because that is for the benefit of all of humanity. So here, everyone is discussing about Lord Krishna. And Queen Draupadi, she asks the queens of Lord Krishna, how did they meet? And we covered that in the last chapter, as how the 8 prime queens, headed by Rukmini Devi, then Satyabhama, Jambavati, Mitravinda, Kalindi, Lakshmana, Bhadra, and one more. And then Rohini was one of the 16,100 queens. They all, discussed how they met Lord Krishna. It is said that in this particular case, in the purport of this chapter, first verse, it is described that Kunti and Gandhari, they were not hearing, so they heard second hand. And Draupadi would not freely speak about how these queens were, they were married to Lord Krishna openly in front of them because they are elders and there is a mood of respect with elders. Oh, and the 8th queen was Satya, the one, where Lord Krishna had to subdue 7 bulls and then he married her. And then how Bhaumasu was killed and 16,100 princesses, they were, accepted as wives of Lord Krishna. So, wonderful pastime, everyone is, hearing, and the main hearer is Draupadi. Yet at the same time, the gopis were also present. And it is very nicely described by Srila Sridhar Swami, that even though the gopis were present and all the queens as they were hearing, and especially the Kuru side, all the queens, they were hearing the tears were flowing, right? They were shedding tears and all the ecstatic symptoms were apparent in their bodies. And the gopis were also experienced. But Srila Sridhar Swami reveals that gopis were not impressed by how these queens were surrendered to Lord Krishna or how Lord Krishna married these queens. Rather, they were reminded of Lord Krishna's sweet pastimes in Vrindavan. And remembering Lord Krishna, they were showing all the ecstatic symptoms, which includes, the coming out of tears, the hair standing on their ends, the voice choking up, and almost like fainting at times. So they were showing all these symptoms, the ecstatic symptoms, and they were constantly immersed. Now, as Lord Krishna was having conversation with Yudhishthira Maharaj and all the Kurus, other Kurus, at that time, sages arrived, the great sages arrived, headed by Narad Muni. Sage Narad along with Vyasadev. So they have been listed here. That who were the sages that came to this place, Kurukṣetra? And why did they come? Was it because of the solar eclipse they came? No. It is also revealed by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that the reason they came was that they knew that Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram will be there. So they wanted to see the Lordships. They came to see the Lordship because He is their heart and soul. So He is the center of their focus. They are constantly meditating and seeking to please Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram. So who are these sages? Dvaparna Vyas, Krishna Dvaparna Vyas, who is father of Shukdev Goswami. Devashi Narad came, Chevana Muni, he came, Devala came, Asita came, Vishwamitra came, Shatanand came, Bharadwaj and Gautam Muni came, and Lord Parshuram and his disciples. So Lord Parshuram, who had created the Panch Samantaka, the lakes where everyone was taking bath and purifying themselves. So he also came with his disciples. And Vashishta came, Galav. Now, Rishi Galav, his description comes, so he has finally appeared in Srimadbhagavatam. There is a city in India, the town, Gwalior. So, Gwalior is also known as Rishi Galav's Tapasthali. So, this is where he was meditating. So, if you are a resident of Gwalior, if you have been to Gwalior, you may already know that Rishi Galav, because of him, that city is called Gwalior. Then Bhrigu Muni, father of Shukracharya, he also came and he is the most prominent of the Saptarishis, the 7 rishis. Pulatsa came and Kashyapa Rishi came. Kashyapa is, again, Vasudeva, the father of Lord Vasudeva Krishna. He's an, expansion of Kashyapa. So that's also interesting that he came while a living entity can expand up to 9 times, right? And here, he is there with Kashyapa Muni and Aditi. They had Vamandev, and Aditi's expansion is Devaki. So Vasudeva and Devaki, they had Lord Krishna as their son, or we also call him Vasudeva Krishna. Vasudeva means son of Vasudeva. So all these personalities came. Along with them, many more. Atri came, Markandeya came, and Brihaspati, the spiritual master of the demigods, Dvita, Trita, Ekata, and the 4 Kumaras, and Angira Rishi. His description we all just discussed in the Ekadashi story. Agastya Muni. So again, Agastya was also Yajnavalkya and Vamadev. Not Vamadev, Vamadev. So all these great rishis came, and as soon as they came, all the Kurus and all the Yadavas and the inhabitants of Vrindavan, all of them, they got up and they paid obeisances to all the rishis. Men, they pay obeisances Dandvat, while ladies, they pay obeisances with the 5 hands, knees, and their forehead touching the ground. But in the case of men, it's like Dandavat, like a stick. Dand means a stick, like a stick. What means like a. They paid obeisances, including Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram. So these sages have come to see Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram, while Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram, along with others, they are paying obeisances to the sages. And the sages are astonished. And then Lord Krishna starts glorifying, addressing the sages on behalf of all the kings and princes who are gathered there. Now you also have to pay attention that among these kings is also Duryodhan, right? Also, Damaghosh, father of Shishupal, and so many other kings are there. King of Kashi. So all these kings, they were, King of Kashi was later killed, but he was there at this time, and they were able to see these sages. And Lord Krishna is glorifying that it is such an amazing opportunity that we are able to see these sages who even the demigods aspire, even the king of the demigods, Indra, is aspiring to see. So again, that's the glory. That the glory of Sadhu Sangha has been identified by Lord Krishna himself. And he is identifying an important fact that when people go on pilgrimage and they just take bath at the pilgrimage and visit the deities in various temples, and then they come back, that is like the activity of crow, gochara also, like that. So he is saying that what is important is when we go on a pilgrimage, we should associate with the saintly persons. It is very important for us to associate with the sadhus. And in this time, there are so many sadhus online, they are giving, so many discourses. So we should take this opportunity to associate with them by hearing the discourses. Just immerse the whole day. There are more, discourses every day than you have number of minutes or hours in a day. So we should take this opportunity to hear. And when we are reading Srimadbhagavatam, we are hearing directly from Shukdev Goswami as he is narrating the stories. And he is narrating these wonderful pastimes of Lord Krishna and his devotees to all of us. So we should take this opportunity to study Srimadbhagavatam, to study Bhagavad Gita, to chant the holy name of Lordship. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So Lord Krishna is glorifying the sages. And the sages are stunned hearing their glorification from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So they are like, and then they understand that Lord is performing his activities appearing just like a common man. Even though he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is appearing just like a common man. And so at that time, the sages, they start glorifying. So one of the important instructions we hear from Lord Krishna in this particular chapter is that when we go on a pilgrimage, and why should we go on pilgrimage? When did it start? People have this question at times. When did this start, going to the temples and going to pilgrimage? When was this really the important part of sacrifice? As a devotion service, it was always part of it, but when did it become part of sacrifice as well? So Krita Tadhyate Vishnu. In Krita Yuga, Satya Yoga, people could meditate. Like we heard in the Ekadashi story, that even a Shudra was meditating, but an untrained person who's not trained, who's not educated, who's not learned in the proper process can cause disturbance. So it is our responsibility to get trained, right? Fire is purifying. But if you don't know how to handle fire and you put your hand in fire, you will burn, right? And you can even cause further burning to others around you. So we have to be very careful and follow the Vedic injunctions when we are handling these situations. Dwapar Krite Tadhyate Vishnu Tretayam Yajato Make. In the Treta Yuga, fire sacrifices are recommended. So by engaging in fire sacrifices, one can attain perfection. Dwapare Paricharyam. In Dwapar Yuga, deity worship is recommended. Going on pilgrimage is recommended. And that is the sacrifice. By performing it, one can attain perfection. So this is what is being shown here. Kala Tad Hari Kirtana. In Kali age, Hari Kirtan is recommended. The process, chanting of the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So by chanting, one can become happy, one can attain perfection in this life. So that has been recommended. So here, as the sages, they are hearing Lord Krishna, so they start glorifying. That Lord, it is amazing that you are covering yourself. But actually, we are covered by your Yogamaya potency. They are actually revealing it. So, and even though Shukdev Goswami is saying that you are covering yourself with Yogamaya, and the Acharyas reveal that actually it is not Lord Krishna who is covered, it is us. Our vision is covered. So there was solar eclipse, last week. So during that time, was the sun covered? No. It is our vision was covered to see the sun by moon. Part of the moon was covering the sun, so we could not see the sun. Sun cannot be covered. So when there are clouds in the sky, does that mean sun is covered? No. The clouds are in our atmosphere on planet Earth. So they inhibit our vision. They disable us from seeing sun. So that is a covering on our eyes, not on sun. So it is very important for us to understand in the right perspective. So Lord Krishna cannot be covered. It is the living entities. So the sages are saying that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead and you are covering us with your Yogamaya potency. And for condition, so these are elevated, liberated personalities. They are under the influence of Yogamaya. While the conditioned living entities, they are under the influence of Mahamaya, the material energy, and being covered by the three modes of material energy. So, in material world, conditioned living entities as we are constantly being influenced by the three modes of material nature, the mode of goodness, mode of passion, mode of ignorance. So they are glorifying Lord Krishna that you are shelter of all. You are the center of the universe. Yet at the same time, you bewilder us, right? So similarly, just like in the solar system, sun is in the center. And all the planets are, revolving around the sun. So in that case, just like, Krishna Surya Sama is said. So Lord Krishna is like the sun. He is in the center always. It is our vision that we don't see him. So that's why we always keep saying that every living entity is a devotee of Lord. Every living entity is an eternal servant. Jivera Swarupoya Krishnera Nityadas. So our constitutional position, our very Swarup, our very nature is as a servant of Lord Krishna. However, when we are covered by Maya, when we are conditioned, being influenced, then we forget about this fact. And we are still, because our nature is to be of servant, we are always servant. But we become servant of Maya instead of Lord Krishna. So we become servant in darkness and ignorance. So Maya is Andhakara. So she is like darkness. So now we are in conditioned state serving Maya. However, when we turn, to face the sun, we don't see any darkness because darkness is behind us in that time, right? The shadow falls behind us and we cannot see it because we are looking at sun, Lord Krishna. So that's why sometimes devotees say that when we are, reading Srimadbhagavatam, when we are chanting the holy name, when we are seeing the deities being worshipped, and we are engaged in various kind of devotional services, we don't feel any material pangs. We are completely at peace. We are feeling this happiness, the eternal bliss. And as soon as we walk out and engage in various prescribed duties and don't remember Krishna and dovetailing it in Krishna service, then we feel material pangs, then we are hankering, then we are lamenting, and various type of thoughts come in our mind. And the easy solution is that we need to dovetail all our prescribed duties, all our actions in Lord's service. It's very easy. All we have to think is it a prescribed duty for me to perform, and not do any extensive labor, right? Atyahara prayascha prajalpa niyamagraha jana sangascha lalyamcha sadhur bhakti vinashyati. That destroys our devotional service. What? Atyahara. Atyahara also means eating more than necessary, but acquiring more than necessary. Because to acquire more than necessary, what will we do? Prayashas. We will do over endeavor. We will do hard labor. And we talked about pravargas. Pa, pa, ba, bhama. Pa is parishram, heavy, labor, hard labor we do. Sometimes even mentally, philosophers do that, right? And spend so much time in doing that labor. Pa is pena. So because of hard labor, the foam, like in the case of horses, when they run for a long distance, the foam gets formed. Similarly, in our bodies, that foam gets formed. This is of lamentation and all the anxiety that is created. Pa, pa, bha. Pa, pa, ba. Ba is bewilderment, right? So we are constantly bewildered in this case, because we are expecting that with all this parishram, all this time being spent, we should have the fruits, but we don't get the fruits all the time. So that is where we get bewildered. And then bha, fear comes, bhai. And with that fear, in due time comes mrityu. So the pravargas we should try to save ourselves from. And that is coming because of hard parishram, because of this need to acquire more than necessary. So, prajalpo. And in such state, we become so bewildered in the, being conditioned, we are constantly talking about, other topics, gossiping, non-Krishna topic. So those topics are taking away from Lord Krishna. So we should not engage in gossips. We should engage in discussing about Lord Krishna. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's very nicely given by Srila Prabhupada. Then one can be silent, yet be talking all day about Lord Krishna. So if we want to talk about anything, we should discuss about Lord Krishna's name, form, activities, pastimes. So that should be the goal of life. Atyahara, prayasha, prajalpo, niyama. And niyamagraha has two meanings. Niyam agraha means rejecting all kind of rituals, and niyam agraha, being too attached to the rituals without understanding the meaning behind. So just performing them for the sake of performing and getting name, fame and glories, but not really understanding that it is for our purification. All the rituals are for our purification, our spiritual advancement, understanding the meaning behind them. That, should be there. Otherwise it becomes just rituals that cause us to spend our precious time and not result to any, we are looking for name, fame and glories and just gossip further. Prajalpa, niyamagraha, jana sanghascha, and having association of materialistic man who don't want to discuss about Krishna, who don't want to associate with devotees, who don't want to engage in devotional service. So having a company of such, people, we our time. And that is most important aspect, because devotee association is paramount. And if you give up devotee association, then there is every chance of your falling down. Lolyam, and this is greed, material greed. Again, associated with atyahara, to acquire more and more. I and mine, becoming envy because of I, that I am so and so, having so many upadhis. And mine leads to lust. And that lust is because of the greed. This is what I have. I'll have more than what I have currently. I'll be the lord of all that province, and I will acquire everything for my happiness. This is where people, they're running after mirage in this desert. So this material world is a desert, and if you are trying to find happiness in this material world, you are chasing mirages after mirages. That's why in material world, one person gets a specific, sets a specific goal, gets the goal, and then as soon as he has achieved that goal, the next goal is there. And constant lamentation is there if they are not able to achieve. So you're constantly aspiring and lamenting, living in the past and future, and constantly in anxiety. And engaging in this manner, Rupa Goswami describes that one's devotional service is destroyed. Now you would ask, okay, if this is the way devotional service is destroyed, then how is it, brought back to life? How can we improve it? So, that is also being described by the 6 principles. Utsahan nishchayat dhairya tat tat karma pravartanat sanga tyaga satavritte sadbhir bhakti prasiddhati. So how does our spiritual life advance as well? How does it become glorious? It is very important to us. Utsahan, having enthusiasm in studying the scriptures, in chanting the holy name, attentively hearing it, chanting it, glorifying the Lordship, because He is through our tongue, when it's vibrating, Lord's names and glories is entering, Lord is entering through our ears into our heart, and He's purifying us. He is all pure, so in His company we get purified. Nishchayat, with determination, having the strong faith, and we covered the stories on faith yesterday, as how, we can develop faith and strong, grow it to the level of nishtha, that Lord will provide us all protection, the 6 limbs of Sharanagati. Lord is our guardian, and we have to humbly serve Him. Dhairyat, with patience. We have to be patient. There is a bamboo seed. It takes many years actually, but it needs constant watering every day. So you sow this seed and you have to constantly water. So a good gardener knows that the seed needs to be constantly watered for 5 years. And then suddenly it sprouts on the 5th year, and within a few weeks it goes to the height of 60 to 80 feet. So that is where we need patience. So we have to constantly keep watering. And what's the watering process? The watering process is the chanting of the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So in this material world, which is like desert, the happiness in this material world is like, trying to acquire things and trying to satisfy our senses. It's like running after mirages. But the chanting of holy name is like water, it's like oasis. And we can nourish our thirst of happiness, the transcendental bliss. Anand bhaya abhyasat. We by nature is always seeking happiness. So that's also nature of living entity, because that's the nature of the Supreme Lord. So we are qualitatively same, quantitatively different. We are infinite civil, He is infinite. So we are minuscule, He is magnanimous. So that's how we should understand that this seeking happiness is something that we have. Yet Lord is Atmaram, we are still seeking happiness in this material world. But to be able to get that happiness, we have to take to drinking from the oasis. And that oasis is Sankirtan Yajna. And the water is the chanting of the holy name. And when we get water, then our thirst is quenched, then we feel satisfied in our heart. And then the seed of bhakti, bhakti lata bij, in our heart gets the water, and it can grow, it can sprout, and penetrating through the material universe, it will finally rest at the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna and bear fruits. So that is the goal we are looking at, and not hankering and rushing after the mirages. So here, the sages are glorifying Lord Krishna, that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you, with the influence of your Maya, Haladini Shakti for the devotees, and Mahamaya for the external potency, for the conditioned living entities. You are covering everyone. And you are performing such beautiful pastimes, just like a common man. Right? The kind of activities Lord performed in Vrindavan, in Mathura, in Dwarka, nobody can perform at current times. If you ask, hey, can you hold, on your left wing, you forget about left wing, on both your hands, a Govardhan, hill as big as Govardhan Hill for 7 days, 7 nights. Nobody can do that, even in current times. So this has been, they are identifying that Lord is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yet we are covered. And why does Lord cover even His pure devotees? So He can have loving exchanges, right? That's why the gopis, they were not so impressed by the queen's story of how they got married to Lord Krishna. Rather, they were thinking of Lord Krishna. Actually, there are 16,108 gopis, and their Swaswarup, their expansion are these queens in Dwarka. Chandravali's expansion is Rukmini Devi. Satyabhama is an expansion of Radharani and so forth. So again, they are the expansions. The queens are the expansions of the gopis in Vrindavan. So the gopis are in Vrindavan are the, at the topmost level. Then come the queens in Dwarka. Then come the goddesses of fortune in various Vaikuntha planets who are serving Lord Vishnu's, the various avatars and so forth. So that is the real understanding how the expansions are happening, even on the Radharani's side, how she is expanding into all these gopis, and then the gopis are expanding into the queens, and the queens are expanding into the goddesses of fortune. As the sages are glorifying Lord Krishna, everyone is amazed, and at that time they were ready to leave. And as they were ready to leave, after having taken, darshan, having seen Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram, feeling fully satisfied, because that was the purpose. They didn't come to get charity and all that. They came mainly to see Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram. And as they were about to leave, Vasudeva, father of Lord Krishna, Lord Vasudeva, Vasudeva came forward and he paid obeisances to the sages, Dandvat, right, the full, stick-like. And then he made a request that I have a request, and if you so are pleased, and if you so desire, please fulfill this request. What is an activity, what is a sacrifice that we should perform to get free from all kind of reactions for fruitive activities? So today is actually 1 + 1 is like 11, we say in India. It's an amazing opportunity that you have in today's date. We discuss this pastime as well as we discuss Ekadashi, and we are freed from the all fruitive activities altogether. So all the reactions are gone. So we can continue to advance in our spiritual life without having to worry about taking birth. So this is amazing pastimes where we have this opportunity. And so when Vasudeva prays to the sages that if you so desire, hearing this request, Devashi Narad, he says there is no doubt that Vasudeva is so glorious, and yet he is making such request. Why? Because the center of life for Vasudeva is Lord Vasudeva, his son, Lord Krishna. Yet at the same time he is asking the sages. And now Devashi Narad starts, and the Acharyas explain, and Srila Prabhupada, he writes in Krishna book, that this is what happens, that when something is very close to you, you ignore that. In India we used to say, Diya tale andhera, there is darkness right under the lamp. While the lamp is spreading light everywhere, but right under. So sometimes familiarity breeds contempt. So he is saying, Devashi Narad says that Vasudeva is father of Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram. Vasudeva is father of Lord Vasudeva and Lord Sankarshan. Yet at the same time he is asking us to tell him the proper sacrifice, the proper activity in the Karma Kanda perspective that will free one from all the reactions of fruitive activities, sinful as well as pious. All reactions should go away. And that is the true message in Bhagavad Gita. We are not just looking to free ourselves of sinful reactions, all kind of reactions, so that we don't have any reaction, because reactions means we have to take birth again in this material world, just to get the fruits of those reactions. Material happiness or material distress. Both ways we'll have to take birth. So he is trying to ask, how can we escape this cycle of birth and death? Janma mrityu jara vyadhi dukkha doshanudarshanam. In material world, we are constantly going through these miseries, which include birth, death, old age and disease. So they are constantly showing us distressful state. They are all constantly causing miseries. Suffering is optional, but miseries are still there. So why suffer and have even an option of suffering when you can completely escape? So that is an exalted prayer to the sages by Vasudeva. And so the Devashi Narad is saying, sometimes it just so happens that someone who is living on the bank of Ganga, He travels a long distance to take bath because he is not realizing the glories of Ganges, river Ganges. So that's also another aspect. Sometimes we could have an amazing devotees as our family members, but we are trying to go and preach outside. Sometimes this happens. We have seen so many preachers. They're going outside. They're trying to preach. They're reading scriptures to people outside, and their own family members sometimes are ignored. While the family members, as per Bhagavad Gita, in the family of a preacher, it will be exalted personalities who would take birth. So there is an opportunity for us to recognize that, opportunity for us to have satsanga right in our family. Sit together, chant the holy name, do kirtan, glorify the Lordship, read Bhagavad Gita, Srimadbhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Prabhupada's books are filled with transcendental knowledge, with his, transcendental ecstasies of Srila Prabhupada. They are filled with these. So we should take this as an opportunity to read about such things. Now, there's wonderful stories Srila Prabhupada gave to help us understand how this concept has been discussed here in this chapter. The story is that of a Nagna Gati Panchu, a boy. Nagna means naked, Gati is running, Panchu is the name of this boy. So when he was a young boy, just about toddler and so as he started walking and running, he would walk all around the village naked. So his name was Panchu, but everyone was saying his Nagna Gati, he's nakedly running, Panchu. So that was his name. That became his name, Nagna Gati Panchu. So when he went to school, to Gurukul, he was a brilliant student. So he was a scholar, so he studied very well, so much so that he went on scholarship to the city, and there in the university he topped, and then he finally became a magistrate, a district magistrate. And one day, as he decided to come to his village, and everybody in the village came to know that he has become a magistrate and he's coming to the village to visit, to meet his family members and friends. There was this old man who was sitting under a tree, on a banyan tree, like a panchayat and all that. There is a big platform under a tree, sometimes there is, and people sit, they sit in there and they have various discussions. So over there, all these elderly men and the villagers, they were discussing. They're like, oh, this is not Nagna Gati Panchu. He used to run around naked. They could not perceive that that boy who was naked running around village could become such an exalted at such a high position. So that is where familiarity breeds contempt. We sometimes fail to realize that from our very close association is a great personality, a devotee of Lord. So we should value everyone who is associated with us and is engaged in devotional service. We should have very loving feeling. We should be looking to serve each other. We should be looking for an opportunity to engage with each other in this loving mood, so that we are collaborating each other, we are cooperating with each other. When Prachetas, they were able to get perfection by meditating in water for 10,000 years, when Lord Vishnu appeared, he said only one thing, that I am very happy with you 10 brothers because you cooperate with each other very well. When Srila Prabhupada was giving his instructions to his disciples, he said that your love for me will be shown the way you will cooperate with each other. Conflict for problem solving is perfect. It's good. Because together we are joining all of our forces to address an issue at hand, and we are resolving that issue. But the moment it goes above that first level to second, third, fourth and fifth, we should never go to fourth and fifth, but even if it goes to second, we should immediately bring it down, because we should not be putting the other person against us. Rather, we should be joining forces to address the issue. And in this world, everyone is disturbed at this current times. People are constantly, first of all, they have short lives. Prayana alpa ayusha sabhya kalavasmin yuke jana manda sumanda matyo manda bhagya upradutaha. Prayana alpa ayusha sabhya. So in this age, Kali age, which is age of quarrel and hypocrisy, people are short-lived. We only live up to 100 years or so. As kalav, and then there is always quarrel. Manda means lazy. So manda matyo is less intelligence. So manda is very little, matyo is intelligence. Very little intelligence. Manda bhag, people are unlucky. And upraduta, and they're constantly disturbed, constantly ready to, have a fight. That is the influence of this Kali age. So in this Kali age, if we are there, these are the influences that we have. Shukdev Goswami is revealing this to Parikshit Maharaj, that this is the effect of Kali age. And yet at the same time, we have this amazing opportunity. Kalera dosha nidhe rajan asti he eko mahan guna. Kirtana deva krishnasya mutta sangha param vrajed. Kalera dosha nidho rajan. Dosha nidha means an ocean of faults. This Kali age, the age of Kaura and hypocrisy, is an ocean of faults. However, asti he eka mahan guna. It has one great quality. What is that great quality? Kirtanad eva krishnasya mukta sangha param vrajed. Kirtanad eva Krishna. So only by performing kirtan of Lord Krishna, by glorifying Lord Krishna, mukta sangha, we can become liberated from this the modes of material nature, from this conditioned life, param vrajed, and attain the supreme abode. So that is an amazing blessing we have in this current age. So we should take that as an opportunity. Just by raising our hand and calling out to the Lordship, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. We should make use of every single moment in our life in glorifying the Lordship and His devotees. So here we hear that Devashi Narada is revealing, and he is talking as how the conditioned living entity behaves, just like a man or a person who is in awakened state, in sleep, and in deep sleep. So now these three states are referring to the conditioned life, because in dreaming state we think, we get different kind of bodies and we think them to be factual. And we act as if everything is really happening to us in our dreams. So that is a dream state. When we get up, we realize it's just a dream. Nothing was real. It was just, concoction of our mind of various thoughts that appear during the dream. And similarly, when we are awake and engage in sense gratification in conditioned life, it is the same state. It is not real, yet at the same time we are engaging. This is not going to give us true happiness. It is like chasing a mirage, yet we are chasing. Why are we chasing? We should understand that the true water is chanting of the holy name, and take to the chanting of holy name. That would satisfy our heart, that would purify our heart. And this constantly flickering mind, the obstinate mind, can be controlled very easily by the chanting of the holy name, Mahamantra. Mantra means mantra, the one that delivers the mind. So our mind can be delivered. And we can be situated, as we get purified by the chanting of the holy name, in our constitutional position, in our swarup. And Jivera Swarupoya Krishnera Nityada. So our engagement should be devotional service. And all our prescribed duties. It's not that we are engaged in devotional service, we don't do our duties. No, we all have prescribed duties. We do our prescribed duties, dovetailing it to Lord Krishna. So that is the message. And now Devashi Narad, he is glorifying that even though Lord Krishna is the center, and Vasudeva has Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram as his sons, still he is asking us. So in a way, Lord Krishna is using Vasudeva to further glorify the sages. That's also described by Srila Chakravarti Thakur. That even though it appears that Devashi Narad is saying this, yet at the same time, he is also identifying that Vasudeva is glorifying us, wants to engage us further. We were about to leave, but now he is keeping us engaged. So he gives the instruction to Vasudeva along with the sages, and the instruction given is that to get all the samagris. Now, lucky for him, lucky for Vasudeva, Nand Maharaj is there with all the stuff that's required, right? From the charity perspective, from the yajna, the various samagris and all that stuff. So Nand Maharaj, he provides all the grains and the milk and butter and yogurt that's being used in this particular, and the cows and so forth. So one important aspect is also given. Sometimes when we want to understand rituals, we want to understand the spirit behind the rituals, so that we are spiritually taking it in the right context. Brahmanas are given charity before the yajna. And after the yajna is performed, all the activities have been performed, the gifts are given to the guests, and the used clothing and the used paraphernalia is given to the singers and the supporters who are engaged in performing the yajna. However, there is one big difference. Sometimes some of the Kirtaniyas are also Brahmanas. So you are not supposed to give the used stuff to those Kirtaniyas. You should treat those Kirtaniyas who are Brahmanas just like the Brahmanas, because Devashi Narad, he is always singing Narayan, Narayan on his veena. So you should not take him like he's a Kirtaniya and we should give him used stuff. No, he's an exalted personality, he's a Vaishnava, so he should be treated with that mood as an exalted Vaishnava who can bless us with the love of Godhead. So we should be seeking his shelter as well. So we have to be, there's a very fine line. And that's why it is said that we have to be trained properly. We have to seek advice from senior Vaishnavas constantly. We should seek advice from our spiritual master constantly. We should refer to the Shastras. So Sadhu, Guru and Shastra, those are our three references. We should constantly, and not just use our puny brain, because our intelligence is very limited. And it's very easy for us to get bewildered. So we should always, before doing an action, it's always good to verify it before you do that, right? So that it's done with the right mood, done with the right attitude, and in a mood of collaboration without committing any offenses. So that is also very important for us to take to our heart, that we want to really perform in a positive mood. We want it to be a loving exchange. We want it to be a happy moment, a collaborative moment, where we all are seeking the pleasure of the divine couple, Shri Radha Krishna. They are in the center. So that is the focus. So here, Vasudeva, he first performs again charity to the Brahmanas, gets all the paraphernalia, and he wears a deer skin while his 18 wives. So Vasudeva has 18 wives headed by Devaki. They all carry the paraphernalia for the sacrifice, various samagris, material that's required for the sacrifice. The sages, they set up the sacrificial arena. Vishwamitra, Vashishta Muni, Angira Muni, all these personalities, they are all chanting the mantras, invoking the fire, and then Devashi Narad also, before performing the yajna, he reveals the purpose of yajna, because that is the spirit, right? Why are we doing a special ritual? And he says that all yajnas are to be performed for the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu. So, Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam Sarva Lok Maheshwaram Surhidam Sarva Bhutanam Gyatva Mam Shantim Richati. Lord Krishna reveals in the peace formula in Bhagavad Gita, Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam. Lord Krishna is revealing that he is the beneficiary of all the sacrifices. Sarva Lok Maheshwaram, he is the supreme proprietor of all material and spiritual universes. And Surhidam Sarva Bhutanam. And he is the best friend, the benefactor of all living entities. Not just humans, of animals, aquatics, all living entities, the mountains, the hills, the trees, all non-moving entities as well. And whoever understands this attains peace, right? And we are peaceful when there is no anxiety. And when there is no anxiety and we are focusing in devotional service, we become happy. So they are engaging Vasudeva, yet at the same time they are engaged also, as Acharya has explained, in performing this sacrifice for the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu. So here, Vasudeva Krishna, he appears in his forearm form, and Lord Balaram appears in his Sankarshan form. So they have taken this forearm form of Vasudeva in Sankarshan. So if Lord Krishna is residing, so this is also very interesting that Lord Vishnu, his residence is in water. Water is also called Nar. And that's why another name for Lord Vishnu is Narayan, right? The one who is residing, Naraparayana. So again, he is residing on the waters. And Sankarshan is in the form of Shesha, Nag, on which he is lying down. Narayan is lying down. So both of them are appearing in their form as, the forearm form as Vasudeva and Sankarshan. Lord Balaram is Sankarshan. And this is identified to glorify that it is for their satisfaction, this is being performed, and so they are satisfied. And first activity that happens is initiation ceremony for the host. So Vasudeva is wearing the deer skin and they are initiated by being, so Abhishek is being performed as part of initiation. So we perform Abhishek of the deities. But again, in a fire sacrifice, Abhishek is also performed of the host, which sometimes is ignored. We should understand it. And that's why Sometimes people say, wait a minute, but how does it happen in congregational chanting? When we chant, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. When we sing the glories of Lord in our, Sankirtan Yajna, as part of Sankirtan Yajna, we first pray to our acharyas. We pray Guru Pranati, and Srila Prabhupada, he is the preeminent acharya of all the members of ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. For is important because if it was off, that means only here there is Krishna consciousness, nowhere else. Rather, the society promotes Krishna consciousness and also recognizes other paramparas, Gaudiya Parampara, other branches in Gaudiya Sampradaya, as well as Rudra Sampradaya, Shri Sampradaya, Kumar Sampradayas. We recognize them. And that's also where people can get Krishna consciousness. And here also they can get Krishna consciousness. And there are immense wealth in our Sampradaya, in Brahma Gaudiya Sampradaya, where we can study such wonderful transcendental scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, Srimadbhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and so many more, like Srila Prabhupada provided us. So we can continue to, and of course Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, he provided us Brahma Samhita, such a glorious, narration by Lord Brahma of the supreme potency, inconceivable potency of Lord Krishna is described in Brahma Samhita. So all this literature, all this wonderful knowledge is available for us to purify us, our very existence that we can engage in. So here the initiation is being performed. So we do the same thing by properly singing, Mangalacharan prayers, Guru Pranam mantra, to purify our consciousness, to come to that level. And then also doing Jai Radha Madhav before, starting Srimadbhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and so many other scripture studies. We do this just to purify our consciousness, to get us in the right mood so that we can, have this conversation, study of the scriptures. And the association of devotees, that is also very important. And so as we are constantly, as they perform the initiation, so the sages perform initiation of Vasudeva, and afterwards all the Yadavas and the Kurus, all the kings and princes, they have taken bath in the lakes, and they are all purified, dressed very nicely. The queens of Vasudeva, they are dressed very nicely, the 18 wives of Vasudeva. He being initiated, afterwards everyone prepares for the sacrifice, and in this sacrificial arena has been set up at this place at Kurukṣetra during the solar eclipse, and sacrifices being performed by the great sages to please who? None other than Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram. After the sacrifice is over, the various gifts are given out to the, various attendants as well as supporters are given the used items. Then all Vasudeva and his 18 queens, headed by Devaki, they do Avabhrata Snan, a snan that commences the performance of sacrifice. So after having taken Avabhrata Snan, being blessed by the sages, they get ready, and then the guests start leaving. So the Kurus, they leave, Bhishma, Pitama, Dhritarashtra and others, Duryodhan, Queen Kunti with Pandavas, they all leave, after having this loving embrace from Lord Krishna. So if you pay attention, it's this whole pastime at Kurukṣetra during the solar eclipse, the performance of charity, the fire sacrifices, the conversation, it's all about Lord Krishna. Everything is about Lord Krishna. So Lord Krishna is in the center. He is the focus of discussion. Everyone is just immersed in discussing and thinking and remembering and glorifying of the name, form, activities, pastimes, paraphernalia of Lord Krishna. That's the whole goal of life. That's what we do now as devotees, and that's what we do after we go back home. We continue to engage because it is transcendental. It is giving us transcendental bliss, and we are, pleasure-seeking living entities. We want to experience that transcendental bliss, which is like full shining sun as Lord Krishna, instead of sparks in the dark, which is in the case of material energy in this conditioned life. So as they all leave, the inhabitants of Vrindavan, they spend considerable time with the inhabitants of Dwarka, with King Ugrasen. And Vasudeva and Nand Maharaj, they have this very nice exchange again. When Nand Maharaj, holding hand in hand with Vasudeva, is glorifying him, such a wonderful activity by not just the person who performs the sacrifice as a host and the sages get purified, but all the attendants also get purified by participating in such sacrifice. So we should take every opportunity to, engage in various kind of sacrifices. Srila Prabhupada writes that in this age, there are no brahmanas who can perform sacrifices. And again, even if the great sages come, our eyes are too gross, they're too dull to even see them. Right? So many times we hear that Srila Prabhupada was able to see Narad Muni come and attend the congregation chanting of the holy name, the kirtan. Yet none of the other devotees were able to see him. Because as a pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada was able to see. Because, he's also, Devashi Narad is also known as one who can be seen by the demigods, one who can be seen by the ones he desires, people should see them. So, we are too dull, yet at the same time, by taking an opportunity, by engaging in Sankirtan Yajna, our senses will get purified, our life will get purified, our existence will get purified. And what will the result of engagement in Sankirtan Yajna? More devotional service, more attraction for Sankirtan, more attraction towards the Lordship. And so, he would really be our focus and he will be in the center. So, every activity, everything that we do will be dovetailed for his pleasure. And he is Rishikesha. He is the master of the senses. So, when we satisfy his senses, all our senses are satisfied. He is Govinda, the one who gives pleasure to the senses. Go means senses, Govinda means the one who gives pleasure. So, Govinda means the one who gives pleasure to the senses. Go also means cows. So, he is also pleasure giving. So, when we give pleasure to Govinda, he also gives pleasure to the cows. So, here, Nand Maharaj and Vasudev, they are having this beautiful conversation. Vasudev had already discussed about, how he had to bring Vasudev, his son, and exchange with the daughter of Nand Maharaj, and how Nand Maharaj is so magnanimous that he took care of his sons, Krsna and Balaram, so nicely. So, Vasudev doesn't know that his sons are Lord Vasudeva and Sankarshan, who are there with the mood to deliver the burden of the earth. Nand Maharaj and Yashoda Mai, they are the parents of Krsna and Balaram, the original personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna, I said the original personality of Godhead for that reason, while Vasudeva is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and here is the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, and Lord Balaram is his first expansion. They are eternally sons of Nand Maharaj and Yashoda Mai. And yet at the same time, Lord Krishna is Aparakrat Bhav. He is not manifested to the eyes, he is residing in the hearts of all his devotees, the residents of Vrindavan. In that form he was present from this point onwards. So, and then they finally, after considerable time together, they spent many days, and then finally the residents of Vrindavan, they returned to Vrindavan, and all the Yadus, they returned back to Dwarka along with Lord Vasudeva and Lord Sankarshan. And everyone in Dwarka, when they reached, they discussed the glorious time that they spent. So again, the congregational chanting is going on in Dwarka about the pastime that happened during the solar eclipse at Kurukṣetra. And the whole city of Dwarka is in complete bliss, because the only conversation in the spiritual world is dovetailed in pleasing Krishna, is all about Krishna, is of the filled with activities of Krishna, and it is for Krishna. So everyone is working for Krishna, it is of Krishna, and everything has been maintained by Lord Krishna. So that is the message today, that we should understand, that in these sages at Kurukṣetra, how they are performing these wonderful activities, all the residents of Vrindavan, all the residents of all the Dwarka, that they have gone to Kurukṣetra, as well as the Kurus who came to Kurukṣetra, they are all engaging in pleasing Lord Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada says that in this particular age, Sankirtan Yajna, Kala Tadhari Kirtanat. So by performing Sankirtan Yajna is the sacrifice. So we are engaged in this Sankirtan Yajna, a sacrifice of the chanting, congregational chanting of the holy name, which can purify us, which can allow us to rise above the three modes of material nature and be freed of this conditioned state, And when we are freed of this conditioned state of the modes of material nature, we can continue to engage in devotional service, which is our swarup, which is our very nature as living entity, not of the body, but of the soul. So we have to make sure that the bird in the cage is properly taken care of. The soul is like the bird in the cage, while the cage represents the body. So we have to feed the bird, and the proper food for the bird, the proper nourishment for the bird is the chanting of the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So we are all going to continue to pray for quick recovery of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj. His condition is still critical. He is in ventilator for many days now, and his kidneys, last we heard, are still continuing to fail, and he's in ICU. And also we are praying for better health and quick recovery of His Grace Akshobhya Prabhu. He is a very loving devotee of ours. He is in our congregation, and many days, even in COVID-19 time, he and his wife have been going to the temple and serving the deities. And it's because of his health that he is not able to do so. So let's pray for them, and also so many friends and relatives of ours that we know who have been affected by COVID-19. Let's pray for all of them and all the living entities, and perform fasting on this day today. Today is Ekadashi, the Shayan Ekadashi, where Lord Vishnu goes to sleep for. So again, this is the Chaturmasya, beginning of Chaturmasya. And this is an opportunity where we should also engage. And it's very interesting that this particular pastime we discuss is during this occasion, because the Chaturmasya was going to begin after the solar eclipse, which actually for us happened last week. And after that, the Yadavas went back to Dwarka, and the inhabitants of Vrindavan, all the Vrajvasis, they went back to Vrindavan. So very similar to the times that we have right now. And we should be praying for all humanity to be able to, overcome this current pandemic. And let's pray to Lord Krishna and observe the Ekadashi fast, refrain from eating grains, and if you can, refrain from eating any other foodstuffs, even non-grain. And if you can stay with falahar, that's even greater. Even higher than falahar is jalahar. So again, just having water, and even higher than is Nirjala Ekadashi. So again, we can also do that. The better we can do. We should not cause. The most important focus is to chant the holy name, to hear the glories of Lord Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, please join us in the prayers, the Srimadbhagavatam prayers for quick recovery of Maharaj and other devotees. Hare Krishna. महाराज की जय, ग्रंथराज श्रीमद्भागवतम की जय, शिला प्रभुपाद की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय, निताय गौ प्रेमानंदे, हरि हरि बोल, हरे कृष्णा
हरे कृष्णा।